Welcome to the Evangelism Podcast. I'm excited about telling people about Jesus, and I'm joined today with a very special guest. Michael and Christina Lusk have been close friends of ours, and we really admire their passion for Jesus and their heart for evangelism. Brother Michael, thank you so much for joining us today.
Well, thank you for the opportunity. I really am glad to be here and looking forward to our conversation.
So, your ministry is very innovative. You are taking sound systems and giving them to evangelists in different parts of the world, and also training them what to say, how to preach the gospel. Tell me a little bit about what you've been doing.
Well, just to give you a little bit of background, and I know you probably know some of this, but for those that will be hearing, we founded our ministry about 15 years ago, and we started in Argentina in South America, and always with the passion to share the gospel, just a simple focus on the message of the gospel. And so as we began to do that, initially in Argentina and then in other nations around the world, we began to discover that there were national evangelists in those nations that really had a desire to fulfill their call as an evangelist, but maybe had never had any type of training, very few resources, and often a sense of being disconnected. You know, they didn't feel like they had a network of other people that really understood what they were doing and got in there with them. And so as we began to meet these individuals, the Lord began to put a burden in my heart to help them, the frontline evangelists. And so that's kind of where the name of our ministry came from, Vanguard Evangelism, Vanguard being the front line of an advance, a front line of a force. And so we began to help these evangelists in different ways. And one of the primary ways that we do that, certainly not the only one, but the primary one that we're kind of known for, is providing portable sound systems to these evangelists.
Now I remember I first met you at a T.L. Osborne crusade in Costa Rica. And I remember that Dr. Osborne really liked you because you played violin. And he played a little bit of violin, and so he said, "Oh, we have an evangelist here from Argentina. Come up here and play some violin for us." And tell me, what type of influence did T.L. Osborne have on your ministry?
Oh, it'd be impossible to measure. I really became familiar with his ministry long distance through his books, and I think that's a story a lot of people share with Brother Osborne. He was a very prolific writer, very good writer, and his books were translated in over 100 languages, and they would ship them out literally by the ton daily all over the world. And so his books are all over the globe. And that was the case for me. I found a copy of his book. It was a small book, not even one of his major books. It was called You Are God's Best. And it was on my aunt's bookshelf, and I just was poking through her books one day. I was about 11 or 12 years old and found this book. And of course, if you're familiar with Dr. Osborne's books, they have an inset generally with some black and white pictures of their big crusades, big open air evangelism events around the world. And I saw those pictures, and I saw for the first time that I can remember somebody that was doing what God had been putting in my heart to do. I didn't know that anybody did that. And so there was an immediate connection, this affinity. And so we began, after my wife and I married, we began to support Dr. Osborne's ministry. And then right about the time I met you in Costa Rica, just prior to that, I met him at an event in Des Moines, Iowa. Miracle Life Conference. It was a week-long event, and it was like he was talking straight to us. We were already in Argentina at that time, and so we were just freshly started, new missionaries, and it was like he was answering the questions that we had about miracles, about evangelism, about how to do the ministry of Jesus. And so through that, then the invitation to Costa Rica, where we met you, and we've been friends with you ever since. And so, yeah, his connection was a heart connection right from the beginning. He was a mentor for us, and privileged to have known him. He's in his reward now, but still very connected to the ministry through his daughter, Dr. LaDonna Osborne, that continues to lead, and I'm on the board of directors there, and also the global events director for Osborne Ministries, and one of the other hats that I wear.
Yeah, I remember some of those pictures in T.L. Osborne's books where he would line up preachers from different countries and next to them would be this big bullhorn with a sound system and a microphone, and he would send them out preaching the gospel. And you're essentially doing the same thing now. How many sound systems have you planted into the world now?
Well, so far we've done over 400. So we've been able to train right around 800 specifically evangelists, in addition to believers, but just speaking strictly of evangelists, close to 800 that we've trained in face-to-face meetings. And then through that, primarily that's the main method we use. We supply these sound systems, and over 400 now. In fact, just before I got in here to record, talking with our director over in French Africa, and we're getting a shipment of another 60 or so units. And so it's just really taken on a life of its own. I mean, when it first started, it was just one evangelist in Honduras, Central America, that is a great friend of our ministry. In fact, he's our director in Latin America now, Alvin Serna. Just saw how he was going up into these village places, mountain villages in Honduras, and planting churches and going, sometimes on a dirt bike or even on foot or on muleback to take the gospel to these villages. And I thought, we've got to help people like that somehow. If we could just give to him, maybe what would be an insurmountable, at that time, a huge financial undertaking to get a portable sound system. But we could just give that tool, and it would instantly multiply the impact of his ministry, the reach of his ministry. And so we think of ourselves as multiplying, amplifying the voice of Jesus in the earth.
So on average, what does it cost to put one of those sound systems in the hands of an indigenous evangelist?
Yeah, the price varies, of course, in different countries, but basically anywhere in the world for about $250, we can put a system in the hands of a national preacher, man, woman, out there planting churches. And it just, one testimony I like to share with people from an Indian evangelist that we were able to sponsor. He said, before I had that sound system, I could go and preach in the village, and a few households around, a few families would be able to hear my voice. And he said, now with that sound system, I can preach, and the people in the other village can hear me. And so it just ultimately, how many times we don't know, but you think that evangelist, he's going to be out there, she's going to be out there preaching anyway. And so you're really just taking someone that's already proven themselves, they're already making an impact, they're already producing fruit, and you're just instantly, for just a small amount of money, greatly amplifying their reach, greatly multiplying their impact. And so it makes sense to do it.
And so you're also coaching these evangelists and training them. How do you go about doing that? What's the process?
Well, we initially start by, I really believe in, as we're able, to do in-person events. And obviously this year with COVID-19, it's been an unusual situation for everybody, but generally speaking, we like to have that initial connection be in person. And so we do face-to-face in-person training that'll last about 3 days. And where we do that is when we go into a city in one of the nations of the world to do a big open-air miracle festival, evangelism festival. Those are typically in the evening. And so in the daytime, the morning of those days, we will train evangelists. And so we do morning sessions, and then that kind of culminates in the distribution of these portable sound systems. And so it's kind of a real powerful dynamic that happens. These evangelists will travel in, sometimes even from neighboring countries. They'll come to receive that training, formally be part of the kind of the real organic, relationship-based Vanguard community of evangelists. And then through that, they're getting that training. They're able to go out in the afternoons with other evangelists that maybe they're getting to meet for the first time, share the gospel, invite people to the evening event, and then participate in that evening service as well. So all together, it's just a total saturation in their calling, relationships that are being forged. I mean, there's no better way to build relationships in evangelism than by doing evangelism. And so we're a testimony to that. We're still here today after 15, 20 years. So that's a powerful dynamic. And then continuing, obviously we come back to the United States where we're based and go to other nations, but we are building touch points, if you will, to keep that community going. So some of the ways that are developing, and this is all very much in a growing process, these evangelists that meet one another, a lot of times we're seeing they're forming kind of chapters, if you will, local groups of evangelists that they can actually be face to face. We're providing opportunities through Zoom and other technology to allow these evangelists to connect long distance and receive further training. We've got a Facebook group that they can be part of, share their testimonies, and also see what's going on with their colleagues around the world. So we're working with a lot of different tools to really build a continuing sense of community.
So of these approximately 800 evangelists that you've trained, have you been able to keep track of how many people they've been able to impact?
We don't have real hard numbers. It'd be very difficult to do that, but we get enough of these snapshots to know that it's a very significant impact. And just the thing that strikes me over and over again is just the sense of gratitude. For an evangelist, maybe in the developed world, in the West, maybe, a $250 sound system, it'd be something they'd be grateful for, but it maybe wouldn't be the world-shaking event that it is in the life of these frontline evangelists in the developing world. But the sense of gratitude, these evangelists, they just can't hardly believe that somebody even notices them, that someone cares about them, believes in them, wants to propel them in their ministry. And really, when I go as an evangelist, my goal is that when I leave that place, that they're not thinking, wow, what a great ministry Michael Lusk has, but really that they would say, wow, I've discovered what a great ministry I have with my people, the place I'm working. And so, they don't need passports, they're already in country, they know the culture, they know the languages of these areas, they know the needs, and they're able to work in a very sophisticated way, a very nuanced way that can kind of roll with the punches, if you will, and have an impact in the face of changing circumstances. So it's a very powerful dynamic that comes into play.
I've heard you share an analogy of the difference between a massive ship coming into harbor and a small canoe that can go up maybe a small stream.
Sure.
Talk to me about that in relationship to evangelists.
Sure. Well, I think it's a picture the Holy Spirit gave to me, and it seems to really resonate with people. And I'm not saying this against any big international ministries. I believe in international ministries. They do have a role. But I compare it to a huge ocean freighter, a cargo ship. The draft, the amount of ship that's under the surface, below level on these ships is sometimes, 50, 100 feet. And so you can't just pull an ocean freighter up into any harbor, any port of call. You've got to have real specific criteria. Everything's got to be in line for that to work. Now, when it does work, you can move a lot of material with it, you can get a lot done, but there's a lot of places that you couldn't get a ship like that. And, to bring that down to the level of ministries like ours and that do international evangelism, a situation like COVID-19, who could have predicted that, what that would look like, and what a dampening effect that had on our ministries, and we're overcoming it. We thank God for that. But it was a real deal breaker, if you will, in terms of doing some of the type of events that we do. And the contrast to that would be the dugout canoe. The dugout canoe, they're used all over the world in primitive settings, and you only have to have about 6 or 7 inches of water to take one of these canoes in, and they can go into these backwater, unreached places, the places we call the backwoods, where maybe the name of Jesus has never been mentioned. Nobody's ever heard the gospel before. No evangelist maybe has ever gone into these communities. And these dugout canoes, these national evangelists, can go and penetrate deep into these nations, places where an international ministry could never go. And so I think it's not an either-or proposition. It's not a criticism of one versus the other. It's just simply to recognize the unique role and to validate it and to empower these nationals and what they're doing that only they can do in that way.
Well, I love what you're doing with doing evangelism coaching of these indigenous native evangelists in the countries that they're used to, that they're working in, and they can have such a potential to reach a huge harvest of souls. You know, Jesus went to every town and every village, and they can literally do that. They can go to every small town, every village, and have an impact. If someone who's listening wants to sponsor a sound system for one of these preachers that you're training and wanted to give a gift, you said it's average of about $250. How would they be able to do that?
Yeah, the easiest way is just to go to our website. It's vanguardevangelism.com. And right in the Give tab, you can give right there online. You can mail it in if you prefer, but the easiest way is just right there online, and you just leave a memo in there to designate it for sound. You can put PA or sound system, and we'll know what to do with it. And we're actively, this is an ongoing program. We obviously ramp up the fundraising when we're doing a distribution, but it's a continuing initiative that we've got going on year in and year out, and there's just no limit to the amount of money that we could put to good use by empowering these national evangelists. So whatever gift you have is going to be put to good use, and we would definitely appreciate it.
Well, I'd encourage you to go and donate to Michael Lusk and to Vanguard to help them train evangelists that are in country, preaching the language that the people speak. They are going often with very little. They don't need to have a huge salary, but they're going everywhere preaching the gospel. And so if you have a heart to help evangelists like that, I encourage you to go and give. Michael, thank you so much for being on the Evangelism Podcast.
Well, thank you.
You guys are a tremendous blessing, and we pray for you all the time.
Well, thank you, and same to you. We love you, and we love what you stand for, and we're in this together. We're winning together with Jesus.
Daniel King is on a mission to save 1 million souls a year, but he can't do it alone. Would you consider sowing a financial seed today? To give, please visit www.kingministries.com.